started. Can you pick it up right from here? I'll probably be up at the board most of the time. This is a basic talk on the thesaurus. We won't go into detail on individual thesauruses. Here you see some signs. This one will help you find works on thesauruses in the library. First of all, a plural. Well, there are two possible plurals, thesauri or thesauruses. And Webster's third, the favorite, is thesauri. In Funk and Wagnall's thesauruses comes first. I kind of prefer thesauruses, I believe, because I don't like the way the other one's pronounced. I think it should be thesauri. So I'll probably be saying thesauruses. They're both used in the literature. There's some more people coming, but I guess they find their way. Okay, first of all, the purpose of a thesaurus. Well, it's different from a dictionary or a glossary because with a dictionary, you're using it to find the meaning of a given term. So you know the term, you find the meaning, dictionary. With a thesaurus, you're looking for the term to match a given meaning. Now, for authorship, you want to find a term which is most appropriate to the meaning you're trying to express. For information retrieval, you're looking for a term which has been used by an author to express an idea for which you're looking for material. Okay, now, what are some of the characteristics of a thesaurus that will enable you to find the most appropriate term? Well, the first thing, obviously, you have grouping of terms. Grouping of terms around a given idea, rather than grouped by alphabetic arrangement as you do in the dictionary. And the other thing you need is an alphabetic arrangement so that you can find the term, some entry point into the thesaurus. So an alphabetic arrangement, a dictionary arrangement. Now these can be either together, that is, for each term in the alphabetic arrangement, you might find there associated the group of terms for that given idea. Or you might have an alphabetic index that refers you to the group of which that term is a part. Okay, let's take an example. Just to take a simple meaning, a simple definition that you might want to find a term for. Suppose you're interested in the term to express the cutting of branches off of a tree. Okay, so you can't think of the term, just say, for instance. So you look up, in your thesaurus, the word may be cut, and hope to find a group of terms for which you'll pick the best one. Now, let's go back a minute and say that in the group of terms, it's kind of like a forest of terms. You approach it, you see some of the terms clearly, but you don't, some of the terms vaguely. Now you might know precisely what you want as far as the meaning goes, or you might just have a vague idea of the meaning. In any case, you approach this sort of forest of words and phrases through the thesaurus. The thesaurus gives you pre-arranged paths to follow through the forest. And hopefully, you might come to a dead end here, you come back, you finally go through, you spot the most appropriate term out of this sort of group. Okay, let's go back to the example of cutting branches off the tree. You have a group of terms with cut. You have other terms in the group. You also have the term prune. You have to attach some symbol to the group. Well, it's usually a numeric. It could be a numeric symbol. Let's call it group 816. Now, the two ways to arrange a thesaurus, the one where you have the alphabetic arrangement with the groups associated with the term in the alphabetic arrangement, you would have cut here, and under cut you would have the whole group of terms which are in some way related to cut. Prune would be in here. You look along, maybe the next term in the alphabetic arrangement would be cutlery or something like that, with its group here. And this same group will appear for every item in the group. And you would, if you looked along, you would find prune with group 8, whatever, 16, under it. And then psychology or something down here. As I said, going to the basics, I think towards the end we'll get into the more recent developments. And hopefully, yes, surely. Mm-hmm.
Under prune, you might also find dried fruit, which is a different fruit, isn't it?
That's right. And in fact, when you look at the indices or indexes that are associated with a thesaurus, you frequently have to deal with the concept of roles. That is, the index might have prune, to cut, okay, we'll use that. See group 816. And dried fruit, see group 108. And I don't know what might be more. So we'll probably see it as we get into some of the examples I have, we'll see an example of that. And this is an important concept in information retrieval. It was introduced by Roget and his thesaurus way back in the 19th century, even though today we think of it, sometimes anyway, some people might think of it as a new development, relatively new. Okay, so that's, let's see now, we did one with the index, which would refer, cut, you would refer back to 816, prune, you would also be referred back to 816. Now, we've gone so far as to have the concept that we need grouping and we need alphabetic arrangement. And when you first pick up a new thesaurus, one that you haven't seen before, you might not even have time to read the directions. Well, probably the first thing you want to look for is the alphabetic arrangement. If it's not right there, I mean, if it's not, the basic part of the thesaurus is not arranged alphabetically, well, don't despair. I'm sure it will have one somewhere, and it will probably be at the end as an index, right? So alphabetic arrangement, very important to find the term, and grouping, this is the whole point of thesaurus arrangement. Now, the groups themselves might have relationships expressed within them. And one of the most important is the hierarchical relationship. This would be a relationship which could be expressed in a tree structure. And there are several types you might think of. The genus-species relationship, the whole-part relationship. Here's an example. Take a car. Okay, we'll just use a term which isn't specific, but we'll think of it as the automobile. And if you want a whole-part relationship, example of that, well, you would have the engine, the transmission, the frame. And as you see, this is like a tree with branches. The it's going upside down, or it's growing upside down, or something like that. But these are the more specific terms. And in this case, they're parts of the car. You also have the other, this is just one other example of a hierarchical relationship, would be the genus species. Well, okay, take motor vehicles. Vehicles, well, there are motorboat, airplane, and the car. And even though these are two separate types of hierarchical relations, they could be joined if it was convenient to do so. If you thought that if you would gain something by making this kind of tree, well, you can do that. Now, you could also apply the genus-species relationship to car, and what would be some species of cars? Well, Chevy or Ford, something like that, might be a species of a car. It wouldn't be a part of a car, but it could be arranged in a tree structure. So this is a very important type. Get back to the basic way to look at thesauruses. Well, with the advent of computers, one principal way to look at arrangements, groups of words, is co-occurrence. It could be two words occurring in the same document, two words occurring in the same sentence. And from, we'll say it's frequency of co-occurrence that you're looking at. And you can automatically develop thesauruses from the frequency of co-occurrence. Well, you still can come up with tree structures and synonym relationships and some of the other relationships. I won't actually stress this. I think we'd better do that maybe at the end of the talk. We'll go into more modern developments towards the end, all at once. Okay, we've had hierarchical relationship. Now, the more familiar, this one is probably the prevalent one in the new thesauruses for retrieving information There's not too much you have to watch out for here. It's pretty obvious, and as we go into the examples, you'll see how this fits in with the thesauruses that are common, such as the Engineers Joint Council and that kind of thing. But one thing I'd like to mention in talking about the hierarchical structure is the type of term you're dealing with. General and specific can mean different things in an information retrieval sense. As we saw there, the general being at the top and the specific being branches under that. Well, you can think of general in two ways. And depending on the type of system you have, it could influence your attitude to the retrieval function. Now, suppose you had a book on the dictionary, and you were discussing the basics of dictionary formation and use and this kind of thing. Not any particular dictionary, okay, and not even perhaps going into detail with the different dictionaries. Well, this kind of material is obviously different from a book on dictionaries, I have known, something like that, which would have a chapter on maybe 25 different types of dictionaries, different species of dictionaries, Webster's, Funkenwagner's, all these. Okay, when you're looking for information on Webster's dictionaries, if it's indexed under the general term dictionary, do you know whether that material is speaking of dictionaries in general terms, the basics of dictionaries, or is it perhaps a book, article or whatever, dealing with the specific types, species of dictionary? Well, often you don't. And I think this is a big handicap because in retrieving information, frequently you'll examine all the items under the specific term you want, you're interested in. You might not find what you're looking for, or you might want to go a little farther. Well, the next step might be to go into the general, a little more general. One step up in the hierarchy, and look and examine those. And you can look at their indexes, you can look at their tables of contents, whatever it happens to be, to see if it has material on that specific topic that you're looking for. So I just wanted to point out, when we're considering hierarchical relationships, there's a lot to it, and it might not be there in the thesaurus. It might depend on your knowing what kind of index terms are being used in the system which you're looking. Okay, so that's hierarchical relationships, and we'll take another look at that as we examine the specific examples. The next one is synonym relationship. Now this is a little tricky too, because there's a tight or strict definition of synonym, which is that if you substitute the synonym for the word, you don't change the meaning of the phrase or sentence to which you substituted it. Well, this would mean that there would be very, very few synonyms, because you consider not only the denotation of words, but the connotation of words, the use of words in different areas. And so this definition is not the one that's usually used when you have lists of synonyms. And lists of synonyms are really thesauruses. I think you could say they are thesauri, lists of synonyms. And synonym you'll find coming up time and time again in literature on thesauruses. And I think you can take a very loose definition. Webster's Third has an example. Newark has become virtually synonymous with long-distance air travel. Okay, so they're using Newark and long-distance air travel synonymously. Now this is probably very well for maybe poets, or it might be well for the information retrievalist, because if he knows this, he might, in looking for material on long-distance air travel, look under a book on Newark. He might, or vice versa. And this is the looser definition. The only problem when you're dealing with the thesauruses for authorship is that a person who doesn't really know what they're doing might substitute some of the synonyms in there as if they were strict synonyms, not thinking of the meanings, definitions. And so you get the combination dictionary and thesaurus with the definitions there. Now this is what March did. Roget made a thesaurus. March said, okay, this is all very well, but the person looking for these terms wants right there, he wants the definition, wants the distinctions between the synonyms. He doesn't want just synonyms, because you could be very much misled by just synonyms. So March made dictionary and thesaurus together. Okay, take the example car. Okay, synonym. Car, horseless carriage. Well, first of all, you might check automobile. Car being, of course, the broader, really, but we used it in that diagram as if it were an automobile. What about motor car? This would be the British. Whoops, motor car. Now, okay, so some thesauruses, controlled vocabulary. Synonyms are very important. Synonyms mean that you'll probably use one of these terms in your indexing vocabulary. And if you were looking for any other one, you would be referred to the one which was used. With your automated thesauruses, maybe using the principle of co-occurrence, well, you might look up horseless carriage. Well, you'd find material on history, maybe, of the automobile. You would find perhaps some old works. So you would find something if you looked that up. The frequency of co-occurrence with other terms. The other terms would be those relating to the history of the automobile. Okay, you look up motor car, you would find British terms co-occurring with it. So that's synonym. Now, There's a lot of different kinds of relationships, of course, which might be expressed in a thesaurus. Most of them are not made explicit because it's not necessary. Let's take some others, though, because they're interesting to mention. And these are a class of relationships. They're all binary, and I'm going to group them all in one area. The antonyms, complements, converses. The antonyms might be a two extreme, like good, bad, and of course in between there might be a lot that's not either good nor bad. You might, if you wanted to know if you were thinking of good, you might want to have a thesaurus which would relate you to the opposite, or the antonym. Complement, okay. What about living and dead is one. It's not living, it's dead. So complement, okay. Suppose you had something. Let's draw a picture of it. Maybe some dots out here and some more things here. Okay, so suppose you were referring to this, calling it X, this little piece of the whole thing. Well, the rest of it is its complement. And this could be any set of terms, really. You're talking about the whole universe of terms, a specific universe of terms. Well, if you single out part of it, then the rest is its complement. So these kind of relationships might be expressed in a thesaurus. What about the converse? Converse is similar, but it has more action in it, like doing and undoing. Let's take some example. Well, addition, subtraction. Yeah. Anyway, I don't think we need to belabor this part of it. You'll see some example when we go into Roget of how they treat these things. Many of the information retrieval thesauruses really don't need to treat this kind of relationship so much, but I think for authorship it's particularly important. I think that, well, in information retrieval too, you might find that a book on, if you were looking for death, a book on life might help you. So even for information retrieval, converses, complements, antonyms are helpful, and you find them occasionally. Okay, let me pass out some examples here and take a look at them. There's 2 pages, and I'll just let you pass them around. Oh, okay. Here's the other page. That's one page, and here's the other page. So we'll just start around. And I'll talk a little bit about Roget meanwhile. Okay, Peter Marc Roget. Peter Roget. He was born in England of I think Swiss or French Protestant parents. So that's why he has a French name. Peter Roget was a physician, and he wrote on various scientific subjects from electricity to biology. But he stuck pretty well with the scientific subjects until when he was 73 years old in 1852. He brought out his Thesaurus of English Words and Phrases, classified and arranged so as to facilitate the expression of ideas and assist in literary composition. If you work in the library, you know that a lot of the old books have long titles. He wasn't unusual in that respect. But why did this man who devoted his life to science suddenly decide to arrange his terms in the thesaurus to facilitate literary composition? Well, probably the reason was he was devoting his attention to the top priority of his day, because English composition, literary composition, was then, as it is today, a very difficult and complex subject, whereas science was relatively simple. You had people like the Renaissance man who, even at that time, and even into the 19th century, some people seemed to know just about everything about the natural world. And information retrieval, of course, was no problem at that time. So he was devoting himself to the greatest need. And he developed a grouping of terms which, even though he intended it for literary composition, his ideas are still quite modern. The form of the thesaurus is closer to some of the most modern information retrieval thesauruses than is the form of some of the thesauruses that came out in the 50s and early 60s. Now, his classification, you can see, isn't the kind that you would use for. Well, he had things like the main classes are existence, relation, quantity, space, order, number, change. And then under that, he would go down, of course, in a hierarchical way. And under each heading, he would have the more specific terms. But you take something like lion. Well, this is in his original thesaurus. Now, they've changed it a little bit, but basically, he designed it for expression. And you look up lion in the older Roget, and you don't find cats big or something like that, and then lion under that with tiger as a related term, leopard, and that kind of thing. You find lion stands for courage, so that he's thinking of lion in using it in a literary way. Now, does everyone have their sheet? You know, I didn't get one. Okay, here's one. Let's look at Roget first. I guess everyone is familiar with Roget, so really, this is nothing to keep. I was just going to use it in the to lecture from. We've already mentioned roles. About 5 years ago in library school, I read an article, and some librarian had introduced the use of roles into his system. Well, here's Roget way back in the 19th century. Suspension. Okay, so what kind of suspension? I mean, what topic does it relate to? Cessation, hanging, or music, or suspension of arms. Now, this isn't so important, of course, when you have a single subject dictionary, or thesaurus, rather. Like if you have a thesaurus of terminology for cement and concrete, well, the chances of needing roles are very much less than when you have a general thesaurus, like the one Roget was trying to construct. Okay, so the index I've shown you first. Number 1 is a chunk out of the index. The dots, of course, up above that would be other S's. And this is an alphabetic arrangement. Then you go down to number 2. Okay, this is the basic part of the thesaurus. You look up under cessation, it says 142, and you see there's a scope note. Change from action to rest. We call these scope notes in the later type of thesaurus. It gives you a little more picture of what they're talking about. Then you have the key term there, the one that it's indexed under, cessation. It's a noun, and then you see a cessation, discontinuance, and a whole list of synonyms in his sense, in a loose sense. Verb, cease, discontinue. So you not only have to worry about the nouns, but you need to their derived, their verb forms from which they were derived. Now, the 143, right after cessation, you have its, its antonym, or its converse. Which is it? Anyway, continuous inaction, cessation, and Roget arranged it in columns. 142 was here, 143 was here. So that he did have this capability of putting the antonyms close together. Okay, so does anyone have any question on Roget? I mean, this is the one everybody should be probably more familiar with, at least it's older, and it's the, yeah.
Do you know anything about the influences on him, or the origins and sources of his indexing system?
Sorry, I can't go into that. My field is actually information retrieval. I just brought this in to give a historic context. I know that as soon as he brought it out, there were some translations of it published in other languages. It made a big splash when he brought it out. Also, there is as late as in 1957, a man named Masterman, who wrote for the Journal of Mechanical Translation, he said that the only way to define thesaurus was by reference to the famous work by Roget. So it's still quite held in quite a bit of respect. Okay, let's turn to the next example, which would be on the next page. Yeah, let's do the next one. Should be from the Thesaurus of Engineering and Scientific Terms by the Engineers Joint Council. The list of subject headings by LC, that's a little more complicated. So let's do this one first. This is, I wrote up here what it says in the preface to the Engineers Joint Council Thesaurus. These are the people that they think should use the thesaurus. In order to maximize the effectiveness of your writing, your indexing, your retrieval, you really should, both the author, the editor, the indexer, abstractor, documentalist, librarian, and the user of information should use the thesaurus. The author, of course, wants the maximum dissemination of his ideas. Okay, he's got to use the terms which people are going to look for. Okay. Well, I've given the example here. Look at number 1. 1 is an example from the basic thesaurus. This is the main body of the text. And you'll see the dots there. This is an alphabetic arrangement. You finally go through the R's, you get to radiation noise. Now, the first type of order that they give you there is to use. The use reference. This is a reference. It says to use radiation noise. Use electromagnetic noise. Well, that's pretty simple. I mean, it tells you right away. You turn to electromagnetic noise. You're not to use radiation noise for indexing. Hopefully, even the authors won't use it, to simplify things. And they think that this is a synonym. Now, there might be a lot of objection to this, particularly from the people who don't like controlled vocabularies. And as you get computerization, you have that facility to develop thesauruses based on co-occurrence. You really don't need this so much as you do with this type of thesaurus.
Is this an effect on a status label?
A status label?
Yeah.
Yeah. I would say so. Well, as I say, the preface does say that it should be used by the authors. In fact, you have the authors writing what they want. Well, they figure that if there are synonyms, equivalents, the indexer at least should try to condense these into one term to simplify indexing and retrieval. So I think it's a status label, but in fact, the authors will use radiation noise, otherwise they wouldn't put it in there. Now, the next one is the one I was really going to point out. Radiation pressure. Okay, so we have the term in the alphabetic arrangement. Let's look under that. First thing, UF, used for. Okay, used for. This is the opposite, the converse of the used reference. Used for solar radiation pressure. Now, I hope this example would just cover everything, and I think it does, except the scope note. It doesn't have a scope note. Okay, the next symbol is this here. And this means that there are more than one term that it's used for solar radiation pressure. But when you look up solar radiation pressure, you find more than one term used. Let's see, I don't have an example of that. I think the other one was that you use radiation pressure and you also use solar radiation. These are the two terms that you must use, so that if you have the author using one term, in this case, the indexer must use two. Now why? Well, this is just the way the source is set out that they think will simplify indexing retrieval. Used for reference. Well, the next one's BT, broader term. This refers to your hierarchical relationships that we saw before. Pressure, okay, this is obvious. Pressure is a general form of radiation pressure, a broader term. Related terms, okay, you see, related terms could be anything other than broader terms and narrower terms. These are relationships which are not hierarchical, not tree structured. But the dash before the corpuscular radiation there indicates that that term, corpuscular radiation, is further broken down by in a hierarchical way. Electromagnetic radiation. So these are the related terms that a person might consult and find what he wants under radiation pressure. Now, the second part of the thesaurus is a classification or grouping, not an alphabetic section at all. Now, this is a very broad classification. There are big groups. Physics, well, the number of terms under each group is quite large in any case. Okay, so what is this? The basic part of the thesaurus, after radiation pressure, you see the number, 2001, ... Now, these refer you to your classified arrangement. This would be the basic part of Roget's thesaurus. Well, in this case, it's not the basic part, but you can still use it. If you are looking for related terms, you'll find a lot more related terms: radiation pressure, acoustics. Well, this is, you might say, a roll indicator, but in fact, it gives you a whole list of terms there under acoustics. Then optics, wave propagation. Again, the different roles in which you find the term radiation pressure used. Well, that's clear. Okay, permuted index. This is the third section of Engineers Joint Council thesaurus. Permuted index just simply means that the terms are permuted. In any phrase, you can find by that there's an entry under any term of the phrase. So in this case, there's only two terms. So you can look under pressure and you find radiation pressure. You look under, if you had a three-term expression, well, you could look under any three of the terms and you would find that expression, that indexing term. Okay, so that's a... Okay, let's try LC, list of subject headings. This is used by our cataloging department in our subject catalog. Now, the reason this is a little more difficult probably is because it's not really a thesaurus. It's not meant to be a thesaurus. It's meant as a guide to the cataloger to create cards at the head of any subject heading which give the cross-references. Now, I've given you an example from one of the supplements to the big red book that you see out. The big red book that you see out at the subject catalog was done in '64. Well, there's been supplements every year since that time. So it's very hard to use for the patron because it's kept up to date that way by supplements. But the catalog should incorporate all the supplements in the guide cards or the cards at the beginning of every subject heading. Now, mariculture. Okay, this is... let's first of all take the different symbols that you might find in the subject headings used in the dictionary catalogs of Library of Congress. Okay, the S symbol is a C symbol. You don't see that there. I couldn't find a good example with that in it. C, S symbol, I think we can refer back to the Engineers Joint Council technique because that one is more common. It's used in ERIC, the Educational Research Institute Thesaurus. It's used in all the different subject thesauruses that engineers use. I should say all, but there's a whole lot of them. And they all seem to use that Engineers Joint Council technique. Well, C is a use, corresponds to use, S in the Big Red Book. Then you have the other one, SA. Okay, a plain essay, just essay. Okay, fish culture. Well, first of all, let's look at shellfish culture. Shellfish culture is under essay, but not under XX. Essay, just plain essay, is a narrower term. See also. I don't know why Elsie did this, because with Elsie subject headings, the general term can be used in the case when you have chapters on different specific subjects. So the broader term in LC is important to refer to, even though you're looking for a specific subject. Now, in our catalog, you only have the See Also references given. And those are narrower terms. Okay, well, let's go on. The X is used for, and again, the X doesn't appear in the actual catalog at all. It's just in the book to tell the librarian that he has a C reference under aquaculture marine. If you look up aquaculture marine, you see a direction to see mariculture. The same is true of the other examples. Okay, let's go on to XX. Now, if it's XX alone, it's a broader term. This is the converse of See Also. It tells the librarian that he has a See Also reference under fish culture, directing him to see mariculture. Now, if the term appears under SA and XX, okay, it is a related term. He's got references going both ways. If you look up fish culture, you'll see a reference to See Also mariculture. If you look at mariculture, you'll see Also fish culture. Now, that's some kind of relationship. It doesn't specify what kind, but it's not a hierarchical one. That is, they don't consider that one is more specific than the other. Okay, are there any questions on this? Didn't take so much time so far. So the Big Red Book that you see out there on the in front of the subject catalog is a type of thesaurus. A little more difficult to use, but once you've tied it in here and see what the symbols actually mean, I think you will find it useful. Now, to sum up, I suppose you all want to know, what is a thesaurus? Well, the word originally meant treasury or storehouse from its root. That's what it meant. Now, sometimes you go back to the root and you find a more specific meaning, which is broadened. Well, in this case, the original use of thesaurus to mean what we know today is that Roget, using the term thesaurus of English words and phrases to facilitate. And from that start, the term thesaurus is broadened so that it now includes all kinds of lists of terms which are helpful, and you find it tacked onto all different kinds of lists. Now, I think the meaning will narrow down. There are some reference sources coming out. The Encyclopedia of Information Science hasn't yet reached the T's. Maybe they will be able to give us a clear-cut definition of thesaurus. But I think this area is very important. It will be important as the automated databases are come more into use because of the need to find terms to query the database. You want to do the best you can at finding just the right amount of material and just the material that you want. So it will become more important, and I'd like to know, Charlie, do you have any comments on there are all sorts of new developments. The smart retrieval system devised by Salton is based on his concept of frequency of co-occurrence. In his system, the structure is developed by the authors. There is no fixed, rigid structure into which the indexer, the retrievalist, and everybody must conform. So that this really, I still think they could use it, but it's not so rigid. And it's kept up to date automatically, because as a new document comes into the system, the co-occurrences are all calculated. It's the frequency of co-occurrences are calculated so that you get, you have your term out here, and then underneath the term you have the terms that are most likely to occur with it. There are some little few problems connected with this, and
By co-occurrence, do you mean in a linear sequence side by side? Or in certain samples of text?
well, Salton has some examples of the sources that he's developed, and you can work out of this. You can work out hierarchical tree structures, synonyms, and in fact he uses a combination manual and automated procedure to form his thesaurus. One of the things that he has done is to develop a discriminator list, and these are terms which are more likely to discriminate between documents. Now you get some terms that occur in so many different documents. Cell, depends on what kind of, for instance, of course that's omitted quite frequently at the beginning of any kind of automated processing. The very simple terms. But you get some others that just simply do not discriminate between documents. And the ones that have a relatively low frequency frequently are those that do the best job of discriminating between documents. And these are the ones you want to use when you're working with something like Index Medicus. I don't know if I want to go into this in detail. I don't think I have time, but if you want to stay, another type of thesaurus that I thought I should mention, that's a thesauropacet. This is a classified, this includes everything, just about everything you can think of. We talked about the classified arrangement of Roget, and there's a classified arrangement in the EJC, the Joint Council Thesaurus, in Index Medicus. And it's used quite a bit. Well, this one has a faceted classification as well as the normal thesaurus type of arrangement. And facets, well, I just thought of one example, like if you had an object of Benin bronze mask, for instance. Okay, let's start here. We could have a geographical facet associated with it. And it could be hierarchically arranged, so that you had Africa, Guinea Coast, Nigeria, Benin. Okay, a facet, material facet. I hate to call it that. Well, yeah, okay. Metal, copper alloy, say, bronze. And then a facet to indicate the form of the material. It's used in art form. Sculpture? I'm not too sure about that. Anyway, it's maybe casting. And then finally masked. So facets, it doesn't necessarily refer to the original use in information science. Probably was devised by Ranganathan. He had facets, a faceted system, the colon classification. But frequently today, you can use facets in different ways to bring out the different aspects of the subject. In the case of how you might use this, well, you might find material on the Benin bronze mask in a book on Benin that might not be indexed by form. This is the principal one here. This is what Ranganathan would call a personality facet. And this you usually put first when you're actually arranging books on the shelf or anything like that. You classify first by what he calls personality. This is a form, the way the subject is actually presented to the user. Then material facet. He has an energy facet too. I think of one in this case. Place, or P-M-E-S-T. Space. This is easy to arrange because all maps are hierarchically arranged. And I think I left out when I talked about Mariculture, the example you have there, subject headings used in the dictionary catalogs and Library of Congress. You see indirect given after Mariculture. Okay, that means that the geographical subdivisions of Mariculture are arranged in a hierarchical fashion. So you would have Mariculture, dash, dash, the dash Madras, something like that. Okay, let's don't do that. Let's talk about Ames and Iowa. It's a more familiar area. And if you had some subject here, and you're dividing it Iowa dash dash Ames, then in your catalog Iowa dash dash Des Moines or Boone, say, might come. Let's say Des Moines. Might come right after, so that it's easy to locate by your normal geographical hierarchical arrangement. Whereas if you had direct after your subject heading, you would eliminate the intermediate step, and you would have Ames, comma, Iowa, and Des Moines, comma, Iowa. And Bangladesh would come in here between Ames and Des Moines. Now, I don't know why some LC subject headings are direct and some indirect, but there you have a hierarchical arrangement of geographical subjects. Are there any questions? Does anybody have any comment? She's quitter. You want to go on with that?
Usually then the direct is the larger group first, larger category, and then
Right. If you have a subject heading out here.
it's like USA, Iowa.
No, I'm sorry. It's not. Direct is the smaller group first.
Or smaller going up.
Right. Direct means that you're going directly to the locality. So that in the case of direct, you have dash dash Ames, comma, Iowa, just to distinguish which Ames it is. There's Ames, California, too, isn't it? But under indirect, you're actually using Iowa as a retrieval point, so that you have dash dash Iowa, dash dash Ames. And this is an important thing I want to leave you with. I wanted to leave you with the concept of grouping, of alphabetic arrangement in order to find the proper group. I wanted to leave you with the idea of relationships within the group. One of the main ones being the hierarchical, tree-structured relationship. Whole part is an example. Genus species is an example. I I wanted to leave you with the idea of a synonym, which can be used in a very loose context to help in retrieval. Now, your Newark and your long-distance air travel, these might be co-occurring so many times in so many documents that you could use one to retrieve information on the other. Those are the basics of the thesaurus. Now, I suppose that's about it, unless someone has any questions on the individual thesauruses. Yes.
When you have that name used, indicating a person, an outstanding minister, and then those who were friends of the minister named their son Harold, Ames, Allen,
Oh,
and so on, you see. So it's the use that you can make, and that gives you an entirely different range of the word.
yeah, right. Oh, yes. Well, you're used to the. Yeah, right.
Since you used that example of Ames, I thought immediately of the other uses.
Yeah. Well, we have that area too that we talked about, which was the area of the role indicator, which distinguishes between different uses of the same term. And we said that this was chiefly valuable when you had a very, very large subject area. Some of the things that are going on, well, in England they are trying to develop a general thesaurus, universal thesaurus. Things like this are happening. I think that's about all I have. Thank you.